Warning: the video is made purely for educational and historical purposes only and does not advocate or incite violence or self-harm. The stories are mostly based on historical records. However, some viewers might find it disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. The Soviet heavy tank Iosif Stalin-2, better known as the IS-2, became one of the iconic symbols of victory in the Great Patriotic War, World War II. It arrived on the battlefield in large numbers in 1944 as the most powerful and heavily armored production tank of the Second World War, and one of the strongest tanks worldwide at the time. Its robust armor and formidable 122mm main gun allowed it to handle a variety of combat tasks. IS-2 heavy tanks had little to fear from encounters with Germany's fearsome Panthers and Tigers. They also proved highly effective in urban assaults and against fortified enemy positions, thanks in large part to their powerful 122mm high-explosive shells. The Iosif Stalin-2 is arguably the only Soviet tank built entirely from scratch during World War II, rather than evolving from pre-war designs. Aside from certain shared components like the suspension and torsion bars, the IS tank was a completely new vehicle, bearing virtually no relation to the older Klim Voroshilov KV heavy tanks. From late 1943 through 1945, Soviet industry manufactured a total of 3,483 IS-2 heavy tanks. Work on a new heavy tank had already been under consideration back in the spring of 1942, because by early 1942 the KV-1 no longer met the Army's needs. Around that time, upgraded German medium tanks, the Panzer Kampfwagen 4, and Sturmgeschütz 3 assault guns with enhanced armor and better weaponry appeared on the battlefield. The 76mm guns on KV-1 and T-34 tanks were not always sufficient to confidently destroy this new German armor. Once the Panther and Tiger I hit the front lines, the Red Army's need for newer, more advanced tanks became unmistakable. The Soviet tractor and tank engineer Joseph Kodin oversaw the heavy tank project. Previously, he had gained extensive experience designing heavy tanks as the creator of the Klim Voroshilov KV series. While the KV was the first mass-produced heavy tank in the world to feature shell-proof armor, it had drawbacks such as relatively low reliability and difficult working conditions for the crew. The development of the IS-2 tanks was led by Nikolai Shashmirin, whom Kodin knew well from their time working together at the Kirov factory in Leningrad back in the 1930s. In the fall of 1942, Soviet military and engineers managed to capture a brand new German heavy tank, the Tiger, near Leningrad. This formidable vehicle was in good shape, though the Germans had removed some of its equipment. Later, in January 1943, also near Leningrad, Soviet troops got hold of another nearly undamaged Tiger, still armed and even with its technical passport intact. News of the new German heavy tanks, along with the capture of these trophies, sped up Soviet efforts to create their own heavy combat vehicles. Another factor accelerating the project was the Red Army's encounter with new forms of fortified defensive structures. Among these defenses were mass-produced German armored machine gun emplacements known as crab bunkers. Their dome-shaped armor, made entirely of steel, was dug into pre-prepared pits. Taking all this into account, Soviet forces recognized the need for a heavy tank equipped with a gun capable of destroying even the best protected targets. Test firing on captured Tigers showed that gun caliber had to increase. However, installing a more powerful gun inevitably made the tank bigger and heavier. Ultimately, the idea of creating a new tank that combined high speed, firepower, and heavy armor was abandoned, sacrificing speed for superior firepower and protection. Initially, designers considered using the 85mm D5T gun. While it was an excellent solution for a medium tank, Khotin insisted that a heavy tank required an even more powerful weapon. Although an 85mm gun could knock out most enemy medium armor at typical World War II combat ranges, it struggled against heavily armored machines. At distances of 500 to 1,000 meters, an 85mm armor-piercing round could penetrate a Tiger's frontal armor only with a nearly perpendicular hit. In the end, Khotin, Shashmiran, and the design team decided to equip the new heavy tank with a 122mm gun. They chose the A-19 122mm core cannon as the base, since Soviet industry was already adept at producing it. The gun was mass-produced at plant number 172 in Perm. By the fall of 1943, the draft design for a new heavy tank mounting the 122mm gun was ready. It impressed first the People's Commissar of the Tank Industry, Vyacheslav Malyshev, and then Stalin himself. The tank made an even greater impression during testing, when it fired on a captured Panther at a distance of about 1,400 meters. Its blunt-tipped BR 471B 122mm armor-piercing round confidently penetrated the German tank's armor, leaving large, jagged holes. A hit to the Panther's turret front not only punched a hole measuring 180 by 240 millimeters, but also knocked the turret off its ring by about 500 millimeters. It's worth noting that during the war, the IS-2 was also referred to as the IS-122, the number indicating the caliber of its main armament. Yet, the tank had its shortcomings. First was its low rate of fire, just 1.5 to 3 rounds per minute, due to its two-piece, separate shell and cartridge ammunition. This limited rate of fire made it harder to sustain intense attacks against the enemy and reduced the tank's effectiveness in fights with enemy armor. Still, according to IS veterans, this slower firing speed usually wasn't a major issue in real combat. Another serious drawback was its relatively small ammunition capacity, only 28 rounds. Because of this, crews often tried to carry more shells than the official load allowed. Despite these flaws, the IS-2's superior survivability compared to all medium tanks, and most importantly, its powerful main gun more than made up for its shortcomings. In December 1943, the Iosif Stalin-2 went into full-scale production. The decisive Red Army offensives of 1944 benefited greatly from the arrival of the new IS-2 heavy tanks on the battlefield. Initially grouped into independent heavy tank regiments, these imposing vehicles were an ace in the hole for tank corps commanders during offensive operations. Each regiment was composed of 4 companies of 5 tanks each, plus the regimental commander's vehicle, 21 tanks total. Later, the Red Army formed larger units, such as heavy tank brigades. During offensives, IS-2 tanks secured the flanks and countered attacks from German armor. They typically advanced behind the main assault forces, either in groups or in a column. They were frequently deployed to capture road junctions and enemy strongpoints. Often, a heavy tank platoon or company was assigned to a tank brigade to support the first wave of attacking tanks. The IS-2S would follow about 200 to 300 meters behind the T-34s leading the charge. For German tanks trying to counterattack the T-34s or ambush them, encountering an IS-2 could prove a nasty and often lethal surprise. Even a 122mm high-explosive round from the D-25T gun could disable a German tank or its crew if it landed just right. In defensive operations, IS-2 heavy tanks repelled enemy armor attacks and suppressed enemy artillery and strongpoints. Typically, the tanks were positioned in the likely zone of a German assault in a staggered arrangement covering 1 to 2 kilometers across and up to 3 kilometers deep. Another tactic was to place a small number of IS-2s alongside T-34s at the forward edge of the defense, while keeping the main force in the rear to control all potential enemy attack routes. Thorough reconnaissance was crucial for the IS-2's success in combat. Tank crews needed reliable information about not just the enemy, but also the terrain. While medium tanks could manage sand, marshy ground, and light bridges, the heavier 46-ton IS-2 risked getting stuck, wearing out its running gear prematurely, or burning extra fuel. Before each battle, crews carefully prepared. Officers received maps showing all known positions, and every crew member down to the driver studied the front lines and terrain. Each IS-2 crew had to understand their tank's role and the overall regimental plan for breaking through enemy defenses. Tankers noted that the new heavy tank was quite reliable. With proper maintenance, it could cover 100 kilometers a day without incident, well beyond the guaranteed operating hours of its 520 horsepower V2 IS diesel engine. Together with other Red Army armor, IS-2s excelled in the urban battles fought across Europe. Historian accounts describe clearing city streets and knocking out enemy strongpoints as a veritable Armageddon for the defending German forces. An IS-2 could charge barricades at full speed, crushing makeshift fortifications and positions under its tracks. When raw engine power wasn't enough, its 122mm main gun settled the issue. Soviet tankers showed no mercy toward the crews of any enemy anti-tank guns they discovered, and upper floors of buildings housing enemy troops could become death traps after a hit from the IS-2's massive high-explosive shells. A single shot from the D-25T gun usually settled any obstacle preventing 1 or 2 tanks and their accompanying infantry from advancing deeper into a city. Not surprisingly, IS-2 tanks were among the first to provide fire support for Soviet infantry during the assault on the Reichstag. Many military specialists and historians consider the Iosif Stalin-2 one of the most balanced and dependable Soviet heavy tanks of World War II. That's all from us for now. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories, and we'll see you next time.